wrote it, saying the Republican Party will never be respectful or strong with leaders like Mitch McConnell at the helm. Mr. Trump went on to say Mitch is a dour, sullen, and unsmiling political hack, and if Republican senators are going to stay with him, they will not win again. The president went on to say he will never do what needs to be done or what is right for our country. A reminder, McConnell went after Mr. Trump after the impeachment verdict on Saturday.
Former President Trump's actions preceded the riot for a disgraceful dereliction of duty.
There's been no immediate response from McConnell's team to the new criticism from the former president so far. Brett?
Mike, thanks. Meanwhile, House Republicans demanding answers tonight from Speaker Nancy Pelosi about what she knew and when she knew concerning Capitol security.
Bitch, what'd you know? And when did you know
obviously erupted into violence.
After the Capitol riots, and leading House Republicans say they want answers from Speaker Nancy Pelosi to some straightforward questions. Leading House Republicans say the American people deserve
look at her walking with her damn
fucking
mask on and shit.
Republicans wrote
I hope y'all are having to show up at court right now. And if that's not happening, I'm gonna be mad as hell because
Pelosi and the sergeant at arms due to a concern about optics. Then during the attack, when Sun requested National Guard assistance, leading Republicans say it took more than an hour for it to be approved.
Speaker Pelosi can't push the buck to somebody else because we're House members. She has the responsibility to tell us what went wrong.
Pelosi aides insist there was no intelligence that predicted violence during certification of electoral votes. Though last week, House impeachment managers argued it was predictable. Speaker Pelosi sent this letter to colleagues late yesterday, writing, quote, "To protect our security, our next step will be to establish an outside, independent 9/11 type commission." Next Tuesday, the former Capitol Police Chief and former Sergeant at Arms for the House and Senate, as well as the D.C. Metropolitan Police Chief, have been invited to testify about the security breach, a joint hearing between the Senate Homeland Security and Rules Committees. Rank-and-file Capitol police officers have delivered an overwhelming no-confidence vote in their senior leadership, saying their officers paid a terrible price for the leadership failure.
The officers of the Capitol Police Incorporated, they're right to have no confidence in their leadership. That doesn't mean, though, that we should turn the Capitol into an armed fortress.
Amid reports thousands of National Guard troops could stay on Capitol grounds until the fall, Florida Republican Congressman Michael Waltz wants to know why.
I have seen nothing that demands such a large force to be there indefinitely and away from their families.
Pentagon spokesman John Kirby says the plan right now is to end the mission of National Guard troops by mid-March. Today, House Homeland Security Committee Chairman, Democrat Benny Thompson, in his personal capacity, filed a lawsuit against President Trump and his attorney Rudy Giuliani, accusing them of conspiring to incite the Capitol riot. The Trump spokesman says Giuliani is no longer representing the former president, but Giuliani remains an ally and a friend. Brett?
More on this with the panel. Mike, thank you. The fight over whether students and teachers should return to classrooms is growing more heated tonight in Wisconsin, where President Joe Biden is headed this evening. State Republicans are targeting federal and aid money for schools that hold in-person instruction at the expense of remote-only facilities. Democrats and many educators are now furious. Correspondent Garrett Tenney reports tonight from Milwaukee.
The more you open, the more money you get. State Republican lawmakers are rewarding Wisconsin school districts for offering in-person classes.
I believe it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing for our kids.
State lawmakers control roughly $68 million federal dollars for education from December's coronavirus relief bill. And under a new plan, districts that have reopened will get a larger share of those funds than those that remain online. Republicans say the goal is twofold: help schools cover the higher cost of being in person and convince others to open their doors.
For most districts that are not providing in-person instruction, you're providing them with an incentive to open and to remain open for the rest of the school year.
I think it's an insult to those of us that are looking out for the best interest of our children, of their families, and of their communities.
School districts that remain completely online, such as Milwaukee, will still receive a share of the much larger federally controlled relief funds. But Democrats and school officials are accusing Republicans of trying to bully them into reopening with this smaller pot of money.
It's incredibly unfair. It's using politics to determine decisions that should be made by healthcare workers, by health departments, and by school administrations and school boards.
President Joe Biden is traveling to Milwaukee tonight, where he'll pitch his massive coronavirus relief plan to voters, which includes funding for schools that the administration argues is needed to safely reopen this year. However, new analysis of Biden's plan by the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office found that schools will receive a small fraction of the total $128 billion this year, just $6 billion, while the rest of the funding is spread out over the next 7 years. In Los Angeles, elementary schools are now allowed to open thanks to improving COVID numbers, though it's not clear how many will decide to do that. And in San Francisco today, the Unified School District postponed scheduled talks on reopening plans, despite an ongoing lawsuit by the city attorney's office. Instead, the board discussed its plans to rename schools it believes represent white supremacy, such as Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. Brett?
Garrett Tammy live in Milwaukee. Garrett, thanks. New York Democratic Governor Andrew Cuomo is facing a rebellion from fellow Democrats over his actions in the coronavirus pandemic. They're accusing the governor of lying to them about COVID deaths in nursing homes following his attempt at damage control on Monday. Correspondent Brian Yanis has tonight's update from Brooklyn.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo being called a liar by members of his own party. The cover of the New York Post declaring the embattled governor is in a tailspin a day after he held a news conference denying his administration engaged in a cover-up by withholding nursing home death toll data from lawmakers and the public in an effort to downplay the extent of the nursing home crisis.
There is nothing to investigate. We should have done a better job in providing information. We should have done a better job of knocking down the disinformation. You'd never knock down all these conspiracy theories.
It took 6 months for the Cuomo administration to reveal that more than 15,000 residents have died of COVID-19 in the state's long-term care facilities, much higher than the about 9,000 reported by Cuomo. Cuomo said his office informed state lawmakers the delay was because they were busy responding to a federal probe by President Trump's Department of Justice. But Democrats say this is not true, criticizing the governor in a barrage of tweets. A spokesman for New York State Assembly Speaker tweeted, other than what was in the news, the Speaker had no knowledge of an official DOJ inquiry. Democratic State Senator Jessica Ramos wrote, trash, no one believes you. Democratic New York State Senator Alessandra Biaggi tweeted, Cuomo's press conference was riddled with lies, fear, and deflection. And Democratic Assemblymember Yolanda News said Cuomo's comments were frightening because for their blatant goal to mislead. At least 14 Democratic state senators are now calling for Cuomo's COVID emergency executive powers to be stripped away.
A year ago, those emergency powers were necessary. Today, they no longer seem necessary.
And despite critics' concerns that the governor has undermined the public's trust, Cuomo says the pandemic is best managed under him and his emergency power to make unilateral governing decisions. Brett?
Brian Yanis in Brooklyn. Brian, thanks. Stocks mixed today. The Dow gained 64. The S&P 500 lost 2. The Nasdaq dropped 48. There are serious questions tonight about the future for the anti-Trump super PAC, the Lincoln Project. Those questions come amid growing controversy over harassment and financial mismanagement accusations. Here's correspondent Jillian Turner.
Under fire for what they knew and when about sexual harassment allegations, founders of the Lincoln Project are calling for the group to shut it. Kurt Mardella, who resigned just days ago, tweeting, "Shut it down already. It's over." And George Conway